Let's create our first form, bootstrap form page, right? To implement the login page. Okay. So let's go in our assignment directory, and in here we're going to create a login page. So we'll do HTML. This will be login.html. Call this login. And one of the things that we're going to do here is that we're going to load that library, that bootstrap library, so that we can style it accordingly, right? So we're going to use link. We're going to navigate to the location of that CSS directory. I think it was a vendor. I think I went up too far. Vendor, bootstrap, dist, CSS, and this is bootstrap min, right? And this is a style sheet, right? Let's see what else. We're going to here create those form elements, and it's a good idea to use the go back to the library and see how is it that we style forms. If you go to the first tab and you go to forms, right, you see that they'll give you several examples on how to style the forms, right? And one of the things you'll notice is that all the input fields have this class form control, right? And also you'll notice that some of these layouts allow you to create layouts that are friendly to larger screens, right? So they have multiple columns on larger screens, but as they become smaller and smaller, they switch into okay, not yet. If you make it even smaller, they switch over to not yet. That's still horizontal. Okay, there you go. Right, it switched to a vertical layout. Right? And it's very easy to achieve this using their implementation. Okay. I'm going to cover some of that, how to do that on Wednesday. For now, I'm just going to introduce form elements. Okay. So we're going to create one right here. We're going to say an input field where we're going to provide a name, a username, right? Also the ID also username. Okay. And we're going to use the class form control. So that's one of the first bootstrap classes that we're going to be using all throughout the semester, right, for the username, right? So if we navigate now to the login page, there it is. It's one big input field that goes all across. We might want to have a label that goes along with this. So we have a label that says username, and which renders right above it. And again, to make it easier on the users, for them to be able to tap on this, we're going to use the for. We're going to say that this is for the username, right? So that when you click on the username, it also highlights the elements. Okay. Same thing for the password. It's going to be something similar. So this will be password, password, and this will be password. So it's going to render right below it. Again, if you click on the password. But as I mentioned earlier, your input field should be strongly typed, right? So this one should have the type of password, so that when you type here, notice that by default it's just plain old text. Text is the default input field, but if you give it the password type, it hides the content. Notice that there's no right-hand side, left-hand side margins on either side. So Bootstrap provides all sorts of containers that provide this kind of margins on either side. So we're going to add it right above and below to give that nice margins on either side so that it'd be easier easier on the eye. So there it is. So it adds those margins on either side. And finally, we'll add a couple buttons for us to be able to log in. Now to do that, again, I encourage you to go through the various stylings and how to style the buttons. You can either use these 4 different ways of doing it, either hyperlinks, buttons, or input fields of type buttons and submit. I prefer hyperlinks. They're the most versatile, right? You can treat it as a link, or you can treat it as a button, right? So I'm going to go with a button. So I'm going to add a button here. So if I re-render my login page, there's my button, right? But apparently I put it outside of the div. Let me put it inside of the div so that it also is inside of the container. There it is. Also notice that I don't have my content properly tabbed and indented. Again, to make it easier on human beings to read your content. Also here, let's add some additional new lines here. Let's add an additional class here, button block. That means change the behavior of the button. Buttons typically are inline. I mean, you can put a whole bunch of them right next to each other, right? So actually, let's do that first. This will be maybe login, and let's put another one, register, where this one navigates to the register page, register. But this one, if you log in, you would go to the profile page, which we don't have yet, profile.html. Right now they render inline, right, one after another, one next to the other. Yes. Yeah, we'll have to add that ourselves. Yeah, that's not part of the default, and it bothers me. Yeah, we'll add it. So by default they behave inline, right? And so you can. So I mean that's what Bootstrap decided to leave it its default behavior, which is probably more common than treating as a block element. But we can override it and tell it that, no, we do want you to behave as a block element, right? So that it takes up the entire width of the page, right? And it adds a vertical spacing, right? So this will be the typical layout that we're going to be using throughout the semester, right? There it is. So register, login, but it does not have this. I'll ask you to please add that additional margins so that it has the same spacing everywhere else. Also, ideally we're going to add some color to this, just to give it some context on what these might mean. Here, I guess login, register. Typically we'll use a button primary as the primary color, the primary action that the user might take. This is what we would expect, that the user would follow the happy path, as they click over through several of our buttons or links, and everything else would be some other color based on some context, right? Register, maybe. Let's see what the primary color. The primary color is blue, right? That's the color scheme the default color scheme that Bootstrap chose. For register, I'm going to go with something green. Success. Success is green. I don't know if it has to do with the color of money. And so there it is. So we have the beginnings of a login page, and clicking on login again would go to the profile page, whereas the register would go to the register page. Which the register page is almost a clone of the login page, right? It would take you only a minute to recreate the login page. All right, makes sense.